If you've been a developer for a little while and you're looking to advance in your career, you might start looking around at job openings, trying to see what does it mean to be a senior developer? Is that the next thing you want to do in your life? So whether your current job title explicitly says junior or maybe it just says developer, here's the thing. The word senior can and often does mean very different things to very different people. So your career has taken you from junior or apprentice dev. Now I believe you are just a staff developer or what you might call a regular developer. You can correct me if I'm wrong with that. And so I think you're exactly right where somebody who is also watching this video, you might be at the same spot that they're at right now, thinking about what comes next. What do I do to level up? So when you think about making this transition, or when you are talking to people who are making this transition from junior to senior developer, where should people start? What's the first thing you're thinking of?
Yeah, I love this question because this is something I'm working towards. And so I wouldn't say I've achieved it. And
Yeah.
uh, I can't just be like, this is the path, follow me. But I can tell them what I'm thinking about and how I'm approaching it. And one of the biggest tips that I have is talking to other senior or talking to senior devs and asking them how their journey went. And like you
Yeah.
said, senior means such a different thing at different companies. So you're going to get a variety of answers, but talking to the ones at your current company and then people outside your company will really give you just a lot of tips to work with and a lot of different ways to approach that path. One thing I really want to mention is I I posted on Twitter and just asked, people around me what their tips were, and I got a lot of helpful feedback, and some of it was stuff I already knew. A big one for me is getting mentored.
Hmm.
As you are earlier in your career, having people mentor you is such a great way to learn best programming practices, to break down knowledge silos, to just learn things that you wouldn't even think of, just how people make their setup more efficient, how they solve problems better than you could even think of, because you just don't know what you don't know. But then as you are moving to higher levels, as you are getting more confident, then turning around and mentoring the people that are behind you, because you may not know the answer, but maybe you have some tools in your tool belt that with some work together, you could find the answer and they'll teach you a lot by working with them.
Yeah, I was going to say, as you said, senior means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but I'm not a developer, but I've worked with a ton of them. I think if you're a senior, then being able to mentor is an important part of your job, almost certainly. And it's really hard to be a mentor if you've never been properly mentored. It's not impossible, but it's really useful to understand what it's like coming from the other angle. That way, I mean, not only, you understand what you can empathize with them. I mean, you should be able to, but you can empathize with them. You can remember what it was like. This is what I was like when I was earlier in my career. You can remember what were the things I wish my senior had told me. That's all super helpful stuff that's going to prepare you for that transition for sure.
And I really recommend, I feel like you've almost touched on this. I really recommend that as you move into a senior level, be the senior you wish you had, like that
Mm.
person who could have, made things easier and smoothed the path more for you. Try to think of what would have helped you and do that for other people, because that is going to make you an incredible senior.
Do you think that there's a minimum number of like levels, like years of experience required, or do you think it really just all depends on what you're doing and what company you're at and what senior might mean? So here's why I'm asking this, because sometimes people might say, even if they are qualified, they might go, I've only been a dev for 3 years, 4 years. I'm not ready to make that leap. Do you think that there's a certain number where people should be, after that, they should be comfortable kind of poking their head up and going, maybe I should look around? Or do you think it all depends?
I really think it depends. I mean, I could throw out a number. I do think that a lot of job postings give you an idea of how companies
Yeah.
think of seniors versus mid level. Often, seniors I see like 5+ years, maybe slightly
Yeah.
more, but it
Yep.
depends on the company, like you said. Some people just have a different foundation they're working from. There are people who were programming and playing around with code when they were 10 years old.
Yeah.
A year or two of professional experience is going to be vastly different for them than a person who pivoted in their career as an adult, and it's maybe a little harder to learn these concepts as quickly. And so I
Yeah.
wouldn't get wrapped up into, I've been doing this for this many years, I should be better, because better at what? Like, as long as you are improving against yourself, don't worry about what other people around you are doing. Use other people to kind of help you gauge where you're at. Maybe talk to your manager and say, like, I'm really interested in exploring being a senior developer. Could you talk to me about what the company is looking for from that? Could you
Yeah.
talk to me about like what you think I could do to improve to show that I'm reaching those levels? Maybe talk to the seniors on the team and talk to them about what they look for in another senior and what they think you could work on to improve. And I mean, honestly, just a lot of the tips that I got when I asked about this was just a lot of coding,
Mm.
projects,
Yeah.
just keep working, come across a variety of problems. So your tool belt just keeps increasing. So you're more comfortable with different problems. One tip I really liked was trying something new in your next project if you can. So maybe you've never worked with caching much. Could you bring that into a project? If it's working for a company, you might not get to choose like what the solutions are, but maybe just have a little list of things that you're like, I need to learn more about this, and find projects where you can pull some of them into.
Yeah. I've been thinking as you've been talking about the differences between, yeah, every company sort of has a slightly different definition of senior, but some of that really depends on as with so many things with hiring, the scale of the company. The smaller companies tend to have senior mean something maybe not quite, I'm not saying it's CTO, but a little bit more broader, right? At a smaller companies, you do a little bit more, you do a whole lot of little things, right? And bigger
Mm-hmm.
companies, it's gonna mean something more focused. So depending on where you're at, if you're at a big company and you want to stay at a big company, then yeah, you want to talk to folks in your company. There's probably an engineering ladder, right? You want to understand what that is. But if you're at a smaller company, there might not be a roadmap. You might have to go to lairjobs.com and see like what do senior job descriptions look like, and kind of start there.
Definitely. And I want to talk a little bit about maybe some differences between the levels. So like
Yeah.
maybe a junior developer is just completing work, maybe work that's like really well written and scoped, but with a little help. But like that's kind of like their realm and their focus. And I feel like mid level, your focus just starts getting a little bigger. Like you're able to work on work a little bit more independently. You may be starting to look around at like the people around you and how your work fits in with your team, and maybe helping them a little bit. And then I feel like senior, you are very aware of your team. Like how do they need help? How is
Yeah.
the sprint goal going, or whatever way you're tracking progress is? What gaps are they feeling, and who can you mentor to kind of help with that? So I feel like your realm of influence and of your focus gets bigger and bigger to each level. And then even higher than that, you have like the staff, principal, engineers. And I feel like they're really focused on strategy, company
Yeah.
goals, maybe multiple teams of people and their work. And so it's helpful to think about those spheres of influence when you're trying to get to the next level. So if you're maybe a mid-level and you're trying to get to senior, how can you be more involved? Can you take over sprint planning? Can you get more involved with your manager and seeing what work you can take off their plate? Can you be in charge of a feature? Can you, like, what ways can you just be more involved in impacting the team and solving problems?
Yeah, you talk that's I mean, I was gonna say, I think a lot of that is good advice no matter what, right? Like if you want to advance, you got to put your hand up sometimes. One thing you talked about with with regards to junior devs early on their career, devs, a lot of the times that work you're getting hopefully is really well written. And I think as you progress, you talked about that scope getting broader. I think also your level of comfort with ill-defined work needs to
Mhm.
get you need to be more and more comfortable with that, to a point where, and it's different for every person, but where you are having those early conversations maybe with people who are not technical. You're sort of, ideally you're advancing to a point in your career where you're just getting these raw, like, hey, business needs X, and you're like, okay, well, what does that mean? But you get more and more. Would you say it's that you should be getting more and more comfortable, and that's maybe a place for folks to try to work on, or try to improve on, is that ability to feel okay with that level of ambiguity?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a great thing that you're highlighting is the higher level you get, the bigger problems you're solving with the
Mm,
least amount of like tools or clarity. Um,
yeah.
as you get
Context.
to
Yeah.
context, exactly. So as you get to higher levels, they might just be like, we have this issue, solve it. And then you need to figure out like, what does that
Yeah.
mean? What's the real problem? How do we solve it? Like, what's the architecture? What's the strategy? And so maybe a great way to take some ownership of stuff like this is how in your side projects can you take like something you want to solve and take complete ownership of it. That's not necessarily what you have to do. Obviously, like for some people, doing things outside of work can be a lot, so you don't have to do that stuff. But how can you, maybe push your comfort level, pull like work that is harder and challenging you more?
Yeah. So, Rissa, you mentioned you talked about how we talked before about how you are. This is kind of where you're at right now. There's something in particular that you're really trying to work on to get to that next level, or are you sort of maybe comfortable with? Not to put you on the spot too much, but is there anything in particular where you're like, yeah, this is something where I'm trying to get better at?
I think a lot of the things I already mentioned are things that I'm working on, but also I got some great tips that I'm going to be looking into more.
Oh yeah.
Reading good code, source
Mm,
diving, like Laravel is written in such a fantastic way, and it's helpful to read how they wrote it and see good code, see best practices, and make sure that like you're paying attention to why they wrote it the way they did, or what you're getting out of that and what they're trying to communicate with how they've written the code. So those are some
yeah.
things that I'm trying to do, is really understand what beautiful code looks like and how I can write beautiful code. But
Yeah.
there's so many different ways to tackle this project, of getting to a higher level. I really liked what one person said about like if you join a new company, reading the code of the other developers around you and getting an
Mm,
idea of who they are and like what they like to do and what their style is. So I think if you're joining a company and hoping to level up there, that could be a great way to get started. Speaking of joining a new company,
mm,
we have to talk about some companies don't promote people well. Like you
yeah.
could be doing
Sure.
everything right. You could be a senior as far as everyone else is concerned, but some companies are slow to promote. And sometimes the answer is if you would like to be a senior developer, you have to go to another company.
Yeah. Yeah. That's just. I mean, yes, in so many ways, right? It might be that there isn't, even though your skills have improved, as far as your company sees it, there isn't like an open slot, or maybe they don't even know what that looks like, right? Or, you could be at a place where there's like one line of budget for new employees and there's a totally other line of budget for current employees. And sometimes the lines aren't connecting in some ways, but, and, sometimes it truly, you really do have to, if you want to move up, you have to move out. I mean, that sort of concept exists for a reason. I have seen it. And I mean, I've done it myself all over my career. Sometimes you are just at a place for long enough and you're like, okay, I need to go elsewhere, and that's okay. Right. Like, it doesn't, it's not the end of the world. People switch jobs. It totally happens. Right. But yeah, I think kind of what you're saying is maybe don't get too try not to get too frustrated if you don't have an upward path where you're at. That doesn't mean that you can't move. It just means you can't move right now.
Yeah. And like maybe the most helpful tip for how to get a senior is you just have to find a way to stay in the game. Like if you do not find ways to make this job enjoyable and have longevity and
Mm,
avoid burnout, like you're never going to make it to senior developer. And uh, that goes along with maybe you're at a company where senior developer path is pretty hard to get to. Like you said, like maybe they just don't have the slots open or the
yeah.
promotions open for it. If it's really important to you to get that as soon as possible, then looking at a different company could be the way to go. Another thing is it's okay to work like a senior developer, with making sure that you're not burning out, but like work to that level even without the title, and you could communicate that in your resume, and eventually
Mm,
you can move into that position by saying like this is how I've been achieving above my level.
yeah. Yeah, that sometimes gets tricky, right? You don't want to say that you're lying on your resume, but it's not lying if you're truthfully telling about sort of what you're doing. And that kind of gets to what you were talking about before, where it's not like there's always this clearly defined line between juniors do this up to a point, then staff does this up to a point, and then seniors do this. There's some in between sometimes. So whether that's taking on leadership of a new feature, or even just assisting with sprint planning or something like that, that's stuff that you can add to your resume that tells people, oh, I'm doing even a little bit more. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, like you don't want to say like I am a senior unless I don't know. I think there are blurry lines there of
Yeah.
I think there's discourse out there of like if you're doing the job and it's not getting recognized, meh. But generally I would say don't put a different title than you
Yeah.
have. You can at the least in that title talk about like how you are going above that role. And maybe in the cover letter you can really
I was just going to
highlight
say.
like those
Yeah, I was
things.
just sorry. I mean, I was just going to say the cover letter is a great place to talk about that, where you can say, I worked here for X number of years as a staff developer before I started taking on additional duties where I did X, Y, and Z, and you can translate that into why connects to things in the open job description. You got to do the whole thing, but yeah,
Definitely. So, there's a lot of ways to get there, and it might not happen where you're currently at, but there's still valuable things you can learn and up level with wherever you are.